In earlier times, natural processes were all that affected the surface water, and it was clean everywhere. When water evaporates out of the oceans or is transpired to the atmosphere through plants, and when it flows through soil, impurities break down. But the balance that the natural processes require has been severely disturbed in America, and today our waters are polluted. Although pollutants are generally the result of agriculture, development, industry, and other unnatural activities, water pollution relies on a fundamental natural process called the water cycle, which is the flow of water from the clouds as rain, across the land and through the soil, into the waterways, and then, through evaporation and transpiration, back into the sky. Many kinds of contaminants are spilled on the ground and other surfaces, and some are purposely deposited. Those that aren't broken down through some physical or chemical process are carried to the streams and rivers, making them polluted. In Delaware today, many of our waterways are contaminated by excessive amounts of the pollutants that flow into them as both surface runoff and contaminated groundwater. It is a situation that developed nationwide for many decades. By the end of the 1960s, pollution was becoming catastrophic. Lake Erie was dying. Chemicals and oil slicks repeatedly caught fire on the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland. Blue-green algae blooms on the Potomac River threatened human health. Insufficient oxygen made stretches of the Delaware River dead zones. It was intolerable, so Americans acted as citizens of a republic should. In 1972, Congress enacted the first comprehensive national clean water legislation. The Clean Water Act became the primary law protecting America's waters. Its two major goals were, and remain, the complete elimination of polluting discharges and making polluted waters fishable and swimmable wherever possible. Two features of the Act have particular importance to Delawareans. First, it's been called a technology-forcing statute because it requires use of the latest techniques to achieve the best results. Essentially, that makes cost secondary to results. Second, it delegates key responsibilities to the states, which gives considerable control to local citizens. If resolutions are costly, it will be because local conditions demand an expensive solution or no one proposed cheaper alternatives. Although implementation of the Act was originally directed to point source pollution, municipal and industrial waste that flows from a discernible source, increased attention is now also being given to non-point source pollution, runoff from neighborhoods, roads, and farms. Progress has been made since 1972. The rate of wetlands lost nationally was almost 500,000 acres per year. Now it is less than 90,000. Wetlands are still being lost, and recent federal actions have left many acres unprotected. But today, the rate of loss is much less, and new wetlands are even being created. Runoff has been significantly reduced, and twice as many people are serviced by modern waste treatment facilities. 1/3 of the nation's surface waters were fishable and swimmable in 1972. Today, it's 2/3. Of course, the remaining third represents a huge number of rivers, streams, ponds, and lakes, and nearly all of Delaware's surface waters remain impaired, either unswimmable or unfishable, or both. Those shown here in red and yellow either do not support aquatic species as they have in the past, or not as well as they should. Contact with the water is restricted almost everywhere, and warnings about fish consumption are so common most of us won't eat anything drawn from a river or stream. As the years have passed, we've learned to live with it, or rather without it, without many simple pleasures past generations took for granted. We can't swim in many of the local streams or swimming holes, and the fish we catch may be contaminated. The goals of the Clean Water Act were to have been achieved by 1985. With the congressional mandates over a decade behind schedule, advocates for the environment looked to the courts. In August 1996, the director of the Mid-Atlantic Environmental Law Center at Widener University Law School, on behalf of the American Littoral Society and its affiliate, Delaware Riverkeeper Network, and the Sierra Club, filed a federal complaint.
Well, the goal of the lawsuit was to force EPA to develop TMDLs to clean up and restore impaired waters in Delaware. These TMDLs are pollution control plans that are supposed to be designed to achieve water quality standards so that every water in the state of Delaware, every reservoir, lake, pond, creek, river, even coastal waters meet water quality standards, and it can be used for fishing, for swimming, for boating, for whatever purposes that they should be used for. The plaintiffs, the American Littoral Society and the Sierra Club, negotiated the consent decree with EPA. What the decree requires is that EPA must develop TMDLs for Delaware's impaired waters unless the state develops them first. So the state gets the first crack at developing TMDLs. If the state doesn't do it on a timetable that was approved by the court and agreed to by the plaintiffs and EPA, EPA will come in and develop those TMDLs for the state.
Human activities, from the digestion of food to the manufacture of goods, involve the use of natural resources and the disposal of waste. It's a premise that the men and women who wrote and passed the Clean Water Act recognized. They also believe the living generations have a responsibility to preserve their environment. Straightforward criteria, in understandable terms, were established to guide regulators, as well as every individual, corporation, and municipality in their use of and effect on the nation's waters. The Act begins by making the restoration and maintenance of the nation's waters a national goal, and it recognizes that the goal will be attained when our waters provide for certain uses. Among them are the protection and propagation of aquatic life and wildlife, recreation, public water supply, agriculture, and industry. The Environmental Protection Agency and the individual states have therefore based their approach to achieving the national goal on those criteria, the concept that water must remain useful. Because human life depends on water and economic activity requires vast quantities of water, it's impractical, perhaps impossible, not to alter the quality of much of the water we use. However, within limits, natural processes are quite effective in cleansing water, and water doesn't have to be absolutely pure to be not only useful, but healthful. So the question becomes, what is in the water due to human activity, and how much of those materials can the water carry and still be clean enough for recreation, water supply, and habitat? Scientists have reduced the question to, what is the total maximum daily load, or TMDL, of a given pollutant a body of water can bear and still be clean enough? Delaware's Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control is working on establishing TMDL targets for every impaired waterway in the state. So far, their success has been mixed. Even though impaired waters have been identified and target limits have been set for some, most of the work remains to be done. The total maximum daily load depends not only on the pollutant and its effect, but also on the characteristics of the watershed that surround the body of water. A watershed is a region or land area that drains to a particular watercourse or body of water. Some, such as the Mississippi River watershed, cover huge areas and include hundreds of other river systems. The Delaware River Basin includes many constituent watersheds, each with distinct physical characteristics. The communities within them have unique social, cultural, and economic concerns that are influenced, sometimes strongly, by topography and water features. That's the case in Delaware. All of us in the first state recognize the distinctions between Upper and Lower Delaware. And a waterway, the Chesapeake and Delaware Canal, is the physical dividing line between the two. Within those two regions, the land consists of multiple watersheds, each with its own characteristics, economies, and politics. Most, if not all, of Delaware's 45 watersheds have one thing in common. They are impaired, although no two in the same way. For example, the White Clay Creek, which includes Newark, the University of Delaware, and a portion of Pennsylvania, is contaminated with nutrients and zinc, primarily from a closed industrial site. In contrast, the St. Jones watershed in Dover is polluted with nutrients, bacteria, and PCBs. So in watersheds, the natural features define areas of common political interest. The authors of the Clean Water Act realize that. The communities in populated watersheds share and are connected by the waterways that flow through them, so the watershed is not only a clearly defined geographic area, but a practical political district, especially for environmental issues and water projects. Residents, business owners, farmers, and others are being asked to join in the process of cleaning up the waters that connect and enhance their communities. To protect and promote their interests, private citizens are forming Tributary Action Teams in every watershed in Delaware. They're helping to create pollution control strategies that will lead to the restoration of Delaware's waters, a return to something past generations enjoyed and future generations are entitled to. In this way, residents are involved at the beginning of the process. They recommend the pollution control strategies that their community will be asked to implement. Before strategies can be developed, DNREC must establish TMDL targets for every impaired watershed. It is a demanding scientific exercise, but compared to what must be done to achieve the goal of returning Delaware's waters to an acceptable condition, it's just a small first step. Even though it will be difficult and quite costly, Delaware must act. Congress and now the courts have demanded it. The Clean Water Act is federal legislation, but the state has a responsibility and interests greater than those of the federal government. Landowners and residents of every watershed in Delaware have even greater interests which should be considered, respected, and protected. To ensure that, public participation is a requirement of both the state and federal acts. Presenting their interests, however, is the responsibility of those who live and conduct business in the affected areas. Improving the water quality of an entire watershed may have significant costs and yield important benefits. That makes it a compelling political issue. Obviously, it isn't an easy problem. Important quality of life and rights issues are at stake. Some constituencies are already acting, environmentalists, farmers, and developers among them. The watersheds in which Tributary Action Teams currently exist in Delaware are the Inland Bays and Nanticoke River in Sussex County, the Murderkill River in southern Kent County, and the Appoquinimink River in Newcastle County. Citizens in these four very different watersheds are at various stages in their development of pollution control strategies. Team members learn about water pollution and their watershed. Then the teams document the issues, outlining the pros and cons of the various approaches. They hold public forums in order to hear the concerns and ideas of others. From the dialogue, common ground emerges. Values and approaches most can agree upon come to light and become the foundation for the team's final pollution control strategy that will ultimately be submitted to the state.
Well, the Inland Bays team has led the way, and since our program inception in 1998, we've produced an issue book which was widely distributed throughout the watershed. And in fact, we are probably the farthest along in actually creating strategies that might prove as the basis for final regulations. The Center for the Inland Bays manages the team, and the team is comprised of representatives from industry, local businesses, local municipalities, as well as concerned citizens who have an interest in improving the water quality of the inland bays. Our efforts are taken very seriously since the health of a $300 million tourist industry clearly depends on water quality in this region. The TMDL regulations clearly illustrate the severity of the problem and the cost for compliance. The state has determined that water quality standards can only be achieved if we reduce nitrogen and phosphorus loadings to the inland bays by as much as 85%. Currently, there are 10 wastewater treatment facilities that discharge effluent to the inland bays. These include the cities of Georgetown, Millsboro, Lewis, and Rehoboth Beach. The regulations call for the systematic elimination of all point source discharges from the inland bays. This means that all 10 of those facilities have to devise other methods for disposing of millions of gallons of treated effluent every day. The city of Rehoboth initiated a lawsuit against the state, and Mayor Cooper of Rehoboth Beach calls it a huge issue both financially and environmentally for the city. He states that it'll cost his citizens tens of millions of dollars, and he's absolutely right.
The Appoquinimink River has received special attention from the EPA since it was the first river in Delaware for which TMDLs were established. Following the consent decree, the EPA promulgated TMDL regulations for the tidal portions of the Appoquinimink. That happened in 1998. Since then, DNREC began developing total maximum daily loads for the entire watershed. When the state and Newcastle County were unable to agree on the TMDL targets, the state turned the TMDL work over to the EPA to finalize. They plan to be finished by December 2003.
The Appoquinimink Tributary Action Teams started several years ago as a result of contact with our science supervisor in our school district, and several educators believed it was important for us to be active in the team and to involve students with this important process. We believe that students need to see how government works, need to take responsibility for their community and the environment. We have created a brochure. We have a speakers bureau that has gone out to community groups and shared information. But our students have also developed a survey of their own and administered it to over 400 families through our middle school. They compiled the results and created a PowerPoint presentation which was presented to a public forum about a year ago. And we also have had the opportunity to share information with our community through a monthly newspaper column, sharing our progress in studying the issues related to water quality and proposed solutions. In addition, we are working on a proposal for a stormwater retrofit project that's going to impact several of our local communities, and several families have volunteered to be water quality monitors with their children. We're particularly proud of the educational component of our TRIB team and the impact that it will have on future generations who will be living in this high-growth area.
The Nanticoke River and its tributaries in Kent and Sussex counties is the largest river system in Delaware that flows to the Chesapeake Bay. TMDLs were developed for the watershed in 1998 for nutrients.
Well, I think we've accomplished quite a bit. The Nanticoke River in Sussex County is the largest river that empties into the Chesapeake Bay, the largest Delaware river. And in 1998, they decided that the TMDLs had to be reduced significantly. We had a couple of forums that were rather poorly attended. And it couldn't really tell whether it was because of disinterest in the river or whether the people just were not educated, weren't aware of what was happening in the river. So we ran some full-page ads in the paper, and then the following meeting there were 35 or 40 people that showed up, and we started getting some things done then.
Troubling symptoms the ads mentioned included algae infestations in the area's ponds, nitrates in the drinking water, and the closure of Trap Pond to swimming. The team faced many challenges in drafting their strategy. In addition, the main stem of the river is small when compared to the landmass that drains into it. This makes it difficult to connect land use at the far reaches of the watershed to the water quality of the river.
But it's probably one of the most pristine rivers in the state of Delaware. I've lived here 35 years and have seen some changes in the river. Used to do some net fishing for rock and shad, and the water clarity seemed to be a little bit better. The shad at one time were a money crop as far as the fishermen in the river were. They just, and it went steadily downhill over the past year. So that was one of the things that the TRIB team decided was probably the most important, was to educate the public as far as what can they do to help improve the river, and really what are they doing now to take away some of the quality of the river.
Despite the challenges, the team has offered a pollution control strategy. They recognize the inherent problems associated with the watershed, and their strategy offers what residents of the watershed see as workable strategies. Further north, in an area once heavily forested and engaged in shipbuilding, lies the Murderkill River. The team there produced a documentary and distributed 14,000 brochures to publicize their forums. Among the Murderkill watershed's unique features are Bowers Beach, archaeological sites, the birthplace of American Methodism, and a rich array of lowlands and wildlife. It's also the home of a major wastewater treatment plant that handles nearly all of Kent County's waste treatment needs. That makes it unlike nearly every other watershed in Delaware because human and industrial waste from outside the watershed are imported for treatment and disposal. It's one of the many conditions that further complicates the task of devising a pollution control strategy. 58% of the watershed's land area is occupied by highly productive farmland. As more area is developed, mature forest stands along the murder kill, which now provide a buffer between productive land and the river, are in danger. Strategies that result in significant pollution reductions are needed. Meanwhile, the Kent County government has offered evidence the science used to establish the TMDLs for the tidal portion of the murder kill marsh may be flawed. Their challenge has resulted in a lawsuit. Many interests are involved, and all sides that offer objections and additional information are being heard. None of the involved parties are daunted or even overly discouraged by the debate because all realize how very difficult and important the issue is. When multiple interests make themselves heard, assumptions are questioned, and premises validated or rejected, consensus can then be built. Tributary Action Teams are working through a tricky yet highly rewarding task. Every month, progress is made towards developing pollution control strategies that will work. Today, the citizens of 4 of Delaware's 45 watersheds, empowered by the United States Congress and the state of Delaware, are actually helping to solve a problem that has lingered for decades and has reduced the quality of life for millions of Americans. Many of the problems caused by so many decades of neglect can seem insurmountable, but with knowledge and perseverance, obstacles fall one by one. As they fall, everyone engaged in the process, every individual in each watershed working to improve water quality, begins to realize not only can they make a difference, they are the difference. To become involved in one of the existing TRIB teams or to form one in your watershed, contact DNREC's Watershed Assessment Section at 302-739-4590.